G'day everyone, it's Mark and I'm bringing you Flight Fact Saturday. I missed yesterday, I was in the pharmacy yesterday and got too busy. And I thought what I'd do is, last week we spoke about flight planning to do with weather considerations. And this week I might just show you how what I have to do with flight planning to do with airspace and terrain and other considerations. So I'm just going to try screen recording my phone and I'll talk you through this. So let's just, I'll start by saying I'm not an instructor. I'm just going to show you guys this just for a bit of understanding about what we go through with planning. But this is just going to show you a typical flight from Hervey Bay down to Brisbane, where we take our patients. So Brisbane's general aviation airport is called Archerfield, just to the southwest of Brisbane. So let's put in a little flight plan there. I've just added those two. So that's a direct line there from Hervey Bay down, so 135 nautical mile. And I cruise at about 130 knots, so 130 nautical miles per hour. So in a straight line, I'd probably get there in just over an hour, adding probably 5 or 10 minutes either end for taxi and all that fluffing around. But I'll give you an idea of how we plan for airspace. So for example, that straight line there, you can see right here is a restricted airspace just around the Wide Bay Army training facility. So they do live firing and also drone flying around here. And so that tells us that, because it's highlighted actually, it tells us that it's active airspace, which means we can't fly through it. And you have to check the NOTAMs, which is the notices about how high the airspace is restricted to, and things like that. So what we might do is I'll show you how to plan around that. I've got a few options. I can either go inland to the west, and a nice little point to fly over is Gympie Airport, or we can go east. So it depends on cloud base. I've now tend to lean towards flying to the east. Keeps me away from these mountain ranges, because if I've got low cloud, some of these mountains, say for example here, that's the height of that mountain is 2,000 feet. And if the cloud's getting much below 1,000, I don't have a lot of space between cloud and terrain. It's an added risk. I don't need to add to my flight. So I actually prefer going to the east over the coast. It just adds that extra layer of safety. So usually I'll plan Rainbow Beach. So I'll add that in there. That gets around that restricted airspace. And that'll still take me through the Sunshine Coast Class Delta airspace. So if we're flying this direction, we'll actually have to talk with the Sunshine Coast Tower when we get close. So up around here, if I'm at 3,000 feet, for example, but by the time I get to Noosa Heads, I've got to actually talk to the tower and ask for permission to fly through there, get that clearance. So let's say we're just going to add Noosa Heads in there, fly over the sunny coast. We'll get clearance through there. They're really lovely people there. Any pilots that are a little wary of flying through airspace, it's actually not as scary as it should be. They're really helpful at keeping everyone separated. And if they're busy, they'll just tell you, look, you just can't come through. You have to stay clear of the airspace, and then you'll have to divert around. But 9 times out of 10, they can accommodate you and get you through. So let's say we've gone through the Sunshine Coast airspace. The next consideration after we pop out of their airspace here where it ends is Caloundra Airport is just to the south of that. So usually within about 3 or 4 miles. So you've got to call up that frequency, let everyone know where you are, and then you fly over Caboolture. I tend to actually track over Caboolture anyway, just to keep to the west of some of this airspace. So getting closer here to Brisbane, these little steps here tell us that if we're above 2,500 feet, we will actually be inside Brisbane airspace. So we would need clearance, but because we're heading down anyway, we usually stay well below that. Stay at 1,500 by the time we get to the TV towers. So every aircraft that's coming into Archerfield from the north has to fly past the Mount Cootha TV towers, which is just here, just to the west of Brisbane. So I actually throw that in my plan. That's actually the route I'm going to follow. So pop that in the plan. And that there, ladies and gentlemen, is some of the main considerations about the flight track I'm going to follow. So that's gone from a straight line. It's gone around restricted airspace, through Class Delta airspace, Keeping in mind heavy traffic between Caboolture, Caloundra area, keeping on those frequencies and talking. Heading over to the west, following it down past the Lake Samson Vale. There's actually a speedway in there, the North Lakes Speedway, and in through TV Towers into Archfield. So that's gone from 135 nautical mile up to 139 nautical mile flight. And the only other thing I'm probably going to show you guys is just this nice little briefing section here. It tells us what the winds are doing. So this is my track, and the winds, for example, today at 1 o'clock at 3,000 feet are all southerlies. So look at those winds are going to blow headwinds against us, about 19 knots. On land it's a little lighter, 11 knots there. So we have to take that off our airspeed. So if I'm busting along at 130 knots and we've got 11 knots headwind, directly headwind, we take 11 off that. So we've got about 119 nautical miles per hour that we're flying across the ground. And that just gives you an idea. That's at 3,500. If we were flying a bit higher, the winds actually get stronger. Look at that. So we're looking at 30 knots, 34 knot headwind if we were flying higher. So that actually gives me an idea of what sort of height I want to fly at. For this flight, I would be staying low. Yes, it does become more turbulent the lower you are, usually below about 5,000 or 6,000. There's turbulence with this wind flowing over the ranges here and creating a bit of a turbulent flow. That's just a consideration to brief passengers about. But there you go. That's just very, very basics of how we throw a quick flight plan together, and then we'll go from there. So I hope you learned something today, give you a bit of an understanding. And if you've got any other flight facts you want to know, please send me a message. Otherwise, I might jump into the aircraft and start talking about some of the systems there. Anyway, I'll catch you all next week.